So welcome back from lunch. So I'm honored to introduce to you Haras Rafiq, and in this struggle against anti-Semitism and hatred, and actually it's not just a struggle against anti-Semitism, it's also a struggle to ensure that as scholars we get to debate and discuss things openly, with respect, and also to promote democratic principles and notions of human rights. And in this work that I've been doing for too long, I had the privilege of meeting Haras Rafiq, must be almost 9 or 10 years ago. And to watch Haras, sort of his work blossom and develop, has been a privilege to see all that you're doing, and his work is expanding, and I'll explain it in a moment. But many of us are here, I was just telling David and Erica earlier, I think we all pay a little bit of a price. Larry was saying how sometimes his colleagues, and not just Larry, the fact that we're here studying this issue is not always the most popular issue to be engaged in. And some of us have problems with our faculty if we're doing these type of things, or with our university administration, as people in this room know. But few of us, our discomfort doesn't get that much further than beyond looking at a faculty department or some opposition in our universities or institutions. Haras really puts his neck on the line, fighting anti-Semitism, and it's amazing to see him do it, not only in trying to understand and fight anti-Semitism, but to also, as you'll understand him today, and as I've come to understand him, how he perceives, that he and his colleagues perceive, how anti-Semitism is being used to not only have an impact on Jews in Israel, but it's being used to destroy, literally, tragically, attack and destroy his mosques, his community, his family, and his societies. And we're here in 2017, many years since I met Haras, and we're sitting here with, I use the term, some people don't like it, but I'll use it, of a genocide taking place in Syria. The latest figures, I keep telling you guys, is up to 600,000 people murdered, 12 to 14 million refugees, people forced from their home, not only from the country, but internal refugees and refugees leaving Syria and Iraq. That's having a profound impact on these people's lives, but also the stability of the region, even now the stability of places like Turkey and perhaps Europe. So these issues are of profound importance, and anti-Semitism is playing a role in the ideology that's being unleashed in too many places. So Haras Rafiq is the CEO of Quilliam International. So Quilliam is now Quilliam International as they expand their work internationally. He was formerly a member of the UK task force looking at counter-extremism in the response to the 2005 bombings in London, and as well as being a peer mentor for the IDEA. He advises regional agencies and governments. Haras has worked on many projects dealing with issues of radicalization, analyzing radicalization and de-radicalization of extremists, very important work. And he's committed to countering xenophobia, hatred, and has spoken throughout the world on these issues, and now he's working throughout the world on these issues. He's also currently an advisor to this Prime Minister. I think it's your third Prime Minister that you're an advisor to. Fourth. Time is flying. Perhaps a fifth soon. So he works with the Prime Minister on, as a consultant, or an advisor rather, on combating extremism, and he's now a member of Europol, and he's an advisor to Europol on issues of radicalization and de-radicalization. So it's really a privilege that you're here with us again, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles, for the introduction. I assumed that the people that were here last year would be the same people that would be here this year. So I tried to do something different this year and focused on the triple threat to our liberal secular democracies. And I'll talk about that in great depth. But what I also will do, after sort of sitting through this morning is maybe throw a few more things into the melting pot as well, because I think some things are evolving that people want to talk about. Before I get into that, again, for some of you that who was here last year, just so I have a rough 1, 2, 3. Okay. So maybe
Most are new.
Okay, so I could have done last year's presentation, which I thought
Some of us over here, our memories are.
Okay, okay, fine. So I know. So most of you won't have heard how I got involved in this particular struggle. This is my jihad. I'll explain what jihad is and what jihadism is, etc. later. This is my struggle. And my background is that, well, actually before the background, I was a normal Muslim, British Muslim, living in the UK. My father came over in 1953. He came with a plan. He lost everything in the partition from India to Pakistan, all the businesses, etc. And he came to the UK with £1 in his pocket in 1953. And the plan was that would be enough to pay for a couple of weeks' rent. And after that, he would work, because there was a need for labour, and he would save £100. Never left £100 for those of you who watch the Austin Powers film. That was his plan. He wanted to save £100 and then go back to Pakistan and rebuild the businesses. He never went back. My eldest brother came over in 1960, he's 75 now. My mother came over in 1964, and in 1965 I was born. And I was born here in the UK, and when I was growing up, and I grew up in a little town called Rochdale, which is near Manchester, part of Greater Manchester. It's very infamous right now at modern time for the grooming gangs of people that happen to be Muslim. Two of them I knew actually. One of them I went to school with. He was about 5 years older than me, and that's a different. It's quite. Yeah, it's shameful that what he's been doing. But when we grew up, we didn't have this faith-based identity politics. What we didn't have at school was people identifying us by our religion and by our faith. If people wanted to know our background, they would say Asian or Pakistani, sometimes Indian, depending upon, if sometimes people thought, well, even though you went to Pakistan, you're Indian. And then you might, that was people who liked us. No one said, you're Muslim. The people that didn't like us used the P word. And here the P word, I'll say, is Paki. In other countries it's not regarded as a bad word, but here it is. And that was the level of identification that we got. My father treated me differently. I was born here, so therefore he allowed me to express myself. My brothers always had a problem with that, and his answer to them was, well, you're Pakistani, he's British, let him get on with it. So I grew up integrating into society. We had no choice. We were 5% of the school population. And I was a punk rocker at the age of 15, and my father allowed me to have orange hair for 3 weeks. I bleached it, thinking, after having watched the Sex Pistols at the Middleton City Hall, I bleached it, thinking it would go blonde, but it didn't. It went orange. and he let me keep it. And I said, nah, son, you've got to get rid of it. And I also had a pierced nose, my nose was pierced, which I took out. He was a pious, practicing Sufi Muslim. These were things that he didn't really particularly like, but British, no dichotomy. You can be British. And then I followed the music fads from punk rock to mod for 2 weeks, and then New Romantic. New Romantic was the one that I got stuck into for quite a lot. And I was a British Muslim, born here, raised like most of my generation at the time. I went to university, and at university I became a member of the campaign for nuclear disarmament. That was my rebellion. There was no Islamism. There was very little anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism I was talking about before was at the mosque, which was an Arab mosque near the university. Perhaps if there were Islamists radicalising at the university, maybe I would have rebelled and become an Islamist at the time. And I will define these terms in a minute. Because Islamist is a very important term, which is different to Islam. So I camped outside Greenham Common, and thinking that my sitting in a camp or sitting outside a field would ban the bomb and everything would be okay and there'd be peace around the world. Then I left university, got into the commercial sector, changed my politics, became more centrist, but ever so slightly right of centre, but in my libertarian at heart, and libertarian is where I've stayed. And I ended up on the board of a $18 billion turnover company, the UK board, and the company was Xerox UK, which were, you know, the turnover in those days in the 90s was $18 billion. It declined significantly since then. Getting on with my life, minding my own business, living how British Muslims were living at the time. Then one day, my youngest child, who's 20 now, she came home one day and said, she was about 7 at the time, "Daddy, I don't want to be a Muslim." And I said, "Why don't you want to be a Muslim?" She said, "Because Muslims are always angry, Muslims are always killing people. I don't want to be angry, I don't want to kill anybody, I'm only 7 years old." Those are the words that she said to me. And I had a bit of a moment of self-reflection which lasted a whole year. Here was a 7-year-old who doesn't really understand anything about Islam. She sees mummy and daddy praying when they're in trouble, where, you know, we as sometimes a lot of people who are believers in God will turn to God when they're in trouble. You know, my eldest son's 27, my second eldest is 24 now. I remember all year they wouldn't pray, and then when it was time for their exams, I'd see the prayer man. You know, in their bedroom, thinking, "Oh, they've been praying, okay, they turn to God." Okay, fine. But here was a girl who didn't know anything about Islam. She didn't know anything about geopolitics. She didn't know anything about Islamism, nothing. I didn't even know that much about Islamism in those days. She just knew that the messages she was getting on television and everywhere else, from some members of the communities, told her this is the way she had to be a Muslim, and she didn't like it. And I thought, well, if she's thinking that, what are other Muslims thinking? And just as important for me, what is my next door neighbour who's not a Muslim? What are the people I went to school who are not Muslims? My friends, what are they thinking about Muslims? This was post-2001. So I sort of went around the world, ended up in Malaysia, Indonesia, Middle East, various countries in the Middle East. Only my second trip at the time to Pakistan, and all around the world, and came back with having gone full circle, believing that Islam that my father had brought to the UK in 1953, where there was no dichotomy between being, for him, Pakistani and Muslim, and then British and Muslim, and before that Indian and Muslim, and for me, British and Muslim is the same type of Islam, and I'm going back to 2002, that was being practiced around the world. And it was a very Sufistic Islam as well, Sufi traditions, traditional classical Islam. Sufism is not a sect, Sufism is an aspect of Islam. And we can talk about that in Q&A afterwards, that's a different lecture in itself. But there was something going on, and I wanted to know what was going on. And I'd got the bug. You know, I really, you know, being driven around in a Daimler with a chauffeur, you know, staying in nice hotels when I was away, being able to afford 4 family holidays a year if I wanted them, all of a sudden decided to leave that and focus on this. And I set up 2 companies, one to pay the bills, which isn't really bad, I'll come to it, and the other one to really get some research done on this. What's happening, what's going on. And I did my master's, my MBA at the University of Salford, so I commissioned 2 PhDs there to do what at that time was the largest survey of British Muslims. This was started in 2000, just middle of 2002, and it was finished circa 2003, and was ready for publication at the beginning of 2004. 1,500 Muslims surveyed face-to-face around the country with a lot of different questions. And there was the answer to one open question. Frightened the life out of me, and it was backed up by other bits of data as well. And the open question was, name a Muslim role model. A lot of people said the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. A lot of people said Muhammad Ali, the late Muhammad Ali. Some of the people said other boxers at the time. But just under 5% of British Muslims, to an open question, said in 2002, when it started, this survey, Osama bin Laden. They could have said anybody in the world, because of their parents. And that frightened the life out of me. And I remember thinking, what do I do with this? So I've got to give this data to somebody. So I ended up, somehow, through lobbying in front of, in those days, the only department in the whole of the British government called Engaging with the Islamic World, which was in the Foreign Office, in front of a bunch of civil servants saying, here is the data, I think we're going to have a 9/11 here in the UK. I don't know what to do with it. And they basically patted me on the head and said, don't worry. I still remember the words. Our extremists here in the UK are much better than the extremists in the USA. We won't have a 9/11 here. We talk to our extremists here. And the extremists were Abu Hamza, who some of you may know, the guy with the hook, Omar Bakri, the Ayatollah of Tottenham, as they used to call him, who is now in a prison in the Lebanon, and a number of others. Andrew Chowdhury, this is about Andrew Chowdhury. Omar Bakri is Andrew Chowdhury's sheikh. Don't worry, we talk to them. And they want to do something over there, they don't want to do anything here. Fine, you know, I'll carry on my work, you guys know that, it's your job to keep us safe, I'll carry on with the work. 7/7 happened, and within 24 hours I found myself in Downing Street, 10 Downing Street, briefing Tony Blair directly on the data. And he invited me to come on the task force that Charles mentioned. And have you guys heard of the CVE strategy in the US and around the world, Combating Violence Extremism strategy? That was lifted from our failed strategy in 2008 and 10 in the UK called PVE, which I wrote to a great extent and updated it, refreshed it when it didn't work out. We'll talk about that. And I found myself advising a number of prime ministers, a number of home secretaries, and going around the world. George Bush at the time as well, we had a few meetings. And then when Obama came along, we were pushed out. And we can talk about that later if you want. So what happened then, whilst we were coming up with these strategies? There was a young, very charismatic leader called Majid Nawaz. Majid Nawaz is the chair now of Quilliam. And he was in an Egyptian prison, in one of Mubarak's torture chambers for being a political prisoner, never found guilty of terrorism or any trial. He was adopted by Amnesty International as a prisoner of conscience, and he was about to be released. And we knew that he was disavowing the ideology and theology. And this is me sitting on the government table at the time. And we thought, what a great idea to empower, amplify voices, what a great idea to actually have Muslims. Because God help us one day in Britain and around the world, if one day Britain, Middle England, suddenly decides and wakes up, today we hate Muslims and we're going to do something bad about to Muslims. I don't know what I'd do, I don't know what my children would do. My children have ever been to Pakistan once in their life, didn't like it, never been again. They're indigenous, both their parents were born here. I see this is my home. You know, I don't see anywhere else as my home. Never really lived anywhere else and enjoyed living there. I don't know what would happen, so that's part of the work that we do, but the other part really is to stop what my daughter said and what's happening around the world. So we thought it'd be a great idea to actually get hold of Majid Nawaz and try and empower him and help him. And he set up the Quilliam Foundation, and the government, by the way, is this Chatham House rules or is it?
It's up to you if you don't want to.
Okay, I'll go forward. Okay, I'll.
Because Izzy is still on the condition that it's okay.
No, absolutely film. Okay, I'll be careful about what I can say. Confidential stuff about government problems. No, that's fine. Basically, so Quilliam Foundation was set up by, I was on the government table at the side, and we decided to fund Quilliam Foundation for 3 years with seed funding, 2 former extremists, and saying to them, you need to then go and find other funding afterwards. And it was great. By bringing Majid Nawaz after he'd come back to the UK after being in the prison, we basically decapitated the largest Islamist group in the UK at the time. And this was a group called Hizb ut-Tahrir, who in 2005, I think it was, or 4, had a conference at Wembley Arena where they had 10,000 British Muslims, and they posed the question, can you be British and Muslim? And the unanimous answer back was no. This was Majid's old group. He was a very senior leader, very charismatic recruiter. We knew that if we helped take him out, because he wanted to leave, he would take a lot of the other charismatic recruiters with him. The old guys would retire, and then beneath them would all be doctors, surgeons, psychiatrists, etc., who were very, very intelligent, but not activists. And it worked, because last year Hizb ut-Tahrir and the year before had their annual conferences, and they got 250 or 300 people there, that's it. But other challenges have happened since then. So Quilliam Foundation now is an organisation, Quilliam International, even, I'm saying the wrong word. Quilliam International is an organisation that, when I took over 2.5 years ago, I had 6 people working for us. We had a UK operation. I was managing director, became CEO last year. We now exist in the UK, Canada, USA, about to open up in Australia, and 1 EU country as well. We employ 21 people, and that's growing. No government funding from the UK at all now, after the first 3 years. We don't need it. That's very, very important. And there's other reasons why we don't do that. We don't, not that we wouldn't take it, but at the moment we don't need it, so we'd rather go to other people that actually do need it. The president of Quilliam International is a guy called Nu'man bin Nu'man. He's Libyan. He was a former commander for Osama bin Laden, fighting against the Russians in Afghanistan. He went out with bin Laden and he worked his way up to become a commander. He was the head of the Libyan contingent in the end. And he was special forces, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, fighting against the Russians. So high up in the structure that the only way he was able to sleep every night was to dig a hole somewhere different and get inside, cover himself and use a pipe to breathe. Because the Russians were actually trying to target him. That's how, in those days obviously, heat seeking inside, different technology. And that's how he used to sleep. He left Al-Qaeda before 9/11 when he was in a cave in Kandahar, about 18 months before 9/11, when bin Laden and Zawahiri announced they were then going to target US assets because they were the far enemy, not the near enemy, and in order the near enemy, the regimes in the Middle East, and they believed that the only way to topple the regimes in the Middle East is to disable the far enemy and stop the appetite for the far enemy, us, to go and prop up these regimes. And bin Laden said, in a public statement, that there would come a time when the US and its allies would not want to go into the Middle East. Obama didn't want to go into the Middle East. It was only when the Yazidis were stuck up Mount Sinjar that he actually went. He had to. You know, thank God he did. You know, more people would have done. So that's Nu'man's pedigree. We talked about Majid. We also have Sheikh Dr. Osama Hassan, who's a former jihadist, Adam Dean, who would have been 12 years ago Anjem Chowdhury, who was a senior member in the organisation and was asked to take over, and he didn't because his mum got cancer at the time. That's what pulled him out of the organisation. And we've worked to de-radicalise a whole bunch of other people. One particular person of interest also is Sheikh Salah Ansari, who is part of the Egyptian Waqf from Al-Azhar. He's the official imam at the Egyptian Cultural Centre here. He was the imam at the Regent's Park Mosque, which is the biggest mosque in London, left because it was too Wahhabi-fied for him and too Muslim Brotherhood for him. Stayed there for about 4 or 5 years, whilst Al-Azhar was sending the imams there, and then Saudi took it over, he left. Now works for us. And I'll tell you why that's important, because one of the things he's doing for us, keep an eye open for in September, we downloaded ISIS's theological curriculum that they use, 600 pages in Arabic, that they use to indoctrinate the indigenous people in Iraq and Syria, the land that they controlled, and recruit foreign fighters. And the stuff in there, anti-Semitic, homophobic, cannibalism is in there, a whole bunch of stuff. We translated it into English. We're not going to publish the English version because what we then thought was we might be doing their propaganda for them if we did that. Rather, we've written a refutation. And I'm proofreading it over the next couple of months to make sure that everything's okay. When he speaks, when he writes something, he writes with the stamp of the largest, the most prestigious Sunni university in the world, which is Al-Azhar. Somebody from Egypt? Al-Azhar, you know Al-Azhar University.
I know it.
But he's very liberal. He's not traditional conservative.
Also liberal?
He's liberal.
He is liberal.
He's very liberal. Yeah. I'm not saying Al-Azhar is. He doesn't have a beard or anything. Al-Azhar's gone Wahhabi.
But I didn't see anyone liberal from Al-Azhar.
If you meet him, yeah, he has an imam. He has an imam actually conducts gay marriages. And Al-Azhar let him do it.
That's a what?
Al-Azhar lets him do it.
Maybe.
Yeah, so that's how liberal he is. More liberal than myself, actually, in many things. So, but because of his status, they can't get rid of him as part of the Waqf. So keep an eye out for that. what I want to talk about, so that's sort of some of the background. I thought it was important. What I want to talk about today, and that's after Larry and I were speaking outside, I want you to imagine that me presenting to you today that I'm not a Muslim. And the reason for that is that I hear many times, well, Haras, you can say that, you're a Muslim. But in actual fact, it's very important that everybody is able to say what I'm going to say today. You don't have to be black to challenge apartheid. You don't have to be gay to tackle homophobia. You don't have to be a Muslim to tackle some of these problems that I'm going to talk about today. It affects all of our civil society. So I want you to imagine that. And I'm going to talk about liberal secular democracy and the triple threat. So sorry about the intro. I thought the intro was important for you to understand where I'm coming from, the pedigree of the people that are working with me, that I'm the tip of the spear here today, talking and sort of a lot of the data and research. Why have I talked about liberal secular democracy and the triple threat? Well, I remember during the protests in Egypt at the time in Cairo, and the elections thereafter, everybody's saying, yeah, we've got democracy in the Middle East, everything's fine, everyone's got democracy. But actually, democracy isn't the end point. The end point really for us living in the West is what we enjoy here, is a separation of church and state. The liberal secular democracy where religion is not used as the guiding force for the law that people use, that lawgivers make. And my prediction at the time was that the Muslim Brotherhood would win the election, and the reason they would win the election is that because they've got all these social projects on the ground, etc., 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 and they will win, not because people actually know who they are or whatever, but they will win because they're the most prominent, and they won. And what do they try to do? They try to bring in aspects of fiqh, not Sharia, fiqh. So I'm talking about a liberal secular democracy, the triple threat, telling people that you have to be theocratic in order to be a Muslim, and anti-Semitism will bring into how that comes into play. A couple of quotes which I found quite interesting. First of all, I really believe that war is a deeply physical act. Ideologies are the muscle behind them. And there's something that I remember reading, ideologies decide the life or death of nations, written by Ivan Menzies. He also added that a nation without an ideology is lost. A nation with a false ideology is a danger to herself and to her neighbours. And a nation, perhaps a little nation with a true and positive ideology, may bring light to the world. That's what I'm hoping that we can all do, and we can all be our small little nations. The other thing is that William Taylor, I remember, said, ideologies contain beliefs which shape our view of why things happen, values which govern our sense of worth and self-respect, and prescriptions about the appropriate form of social relationships with others. Together, these three elements, they shape our perceptions both of what is and of what might be. Perception is a key word here. When I go onto the pathways to radicalisation, you'll understand why. Also, he said, while the gap between the two, what is and what might be, becomes too wide, mass fanaticism develops as a flight from an ideologically defined hell of the present to an ideologically defined heaven of the future. Very, very important words when it comes to radicalisation. Very important words when it comes to polarisation. Very important words when it comes to people taking extreme positions. And the triple threat. Let me just go back. The triple threat for me, before I go into some definitions, is the far left and what we call the regressive left. The far right and Islamism. And Islam and Islamism, and I want to actually make this definition here before I get into some further into the presentation. There is a distinct difference between Islam and Islamism. Just as there's a difference between social and socialism, socialism is where we interact. Socialism is a distinct political ideology that happens to be left of centre. Islam is a religion that over 1 billion people in the world practice in different ways. There are people in Indonesia who will call people in India non-Muslims. There are people in India who will call other people in India non-Muslims. There are people in Pakistan. And it's different. Some people like music, some people dance, some people wail, some people allow alcohol. Imam Abu Hanifa, one of the 4 jurists within the Sunni traditions, probably the main one, was very literal in his interpretation of the word khamr. The Quran says, bans khamr. And he said that khamr is only if it's from grapes, from barley, and I think wheat is the 3rd one. Therefore, he said anything else is not khamr. Therefore, provided you don't get drunk, you can drink it.
Could you translate? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Could you translate the words that you're using?
Sorry. Khamr is the word used in the Quran to, it says it bans khamr, alcoholic drink.
Oh, okay.
And he said, Imam Abu Hanifa is the jurist that's followed by the majority of Muslims around the world. Turkey, India, Pakistan, etc., all these places. And he said that khamr is only referred to in the Quran if it is brewed, fermented from barley, grapes, or wheat. Therefore, anything else is not khamr. Vodka is not khamr. A lot of people, Muslim, you go to Turkey, go to some of these countries, they will drink based on this fatwa. Many others, the majority, however, say it's not permissible. But a significant number do believe in this fatwa. Muslims practice Islam differently around the world. Islamism is a distinct political ideology that is contemporary. The grandfather of modern day Islamism is Sayyid Qutb. And I would recommend, if people haven't read it already, read Milestones, which I guess is probably the most, the equivalent book is Das Kapital or Mein Kampf or something like that. And Qutb actually, I'll talk about what it is in a minute. So, Islamism is a distinct political ideology that wants to do 2 things. The first thing is to set up a utopian Islamist state and enforce a state law. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. I've gone too far. Okay, what's that? Okay, come back to that. Definitions. Extremism for me is a desire to enforce liberal views which are a dichotomy with liberal secular views. That's number 1. They can be violent and non-violent. Extremism isn't always Islamist. It can be right and left. We call it far left, progressive left. And that's opposed to people generally on the left. There is a symbiotic relationship between the 3, which I'll show. And some people waver. You'll get some people who will be Labour voters, left of centre voters for everything apart from Brexit and Islam. Brexit and anti-Semitism. Or sometimes the 3. Sometimes it's difficult, becoming more and more difficult to categorise people by just far right and far left, etc. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to use the triple threat in this way. Sorry, I forgot about this stuff. Now I'll go to Islamism. So Islamism is the distinct desire to set up a utopian Islamist state and enforce a particular version of Sharia as state law. The second thing they want to do is to spread that around the world. And the third thing, as a byline, wipe Israel off the map. That's the 3 things Islamists want to do. Anybody who doesn't support this is not an Islamist. He may be conservative, he may be hateful, he may be a xenophobe, he may be a lot of it, may not be. But this is Islamism, this is what David was talking about this morning. A lot of the scholars, if not all of them, were Islamist scholars. Jihadism, as opposed to jihad, I said this is my jihad. There's a hadith saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where after a battle he was asked, we've just done the greatest jihad, what should we do now? And he said, go and do the jihad al-akbar, the real greatest jihad. I'm going to say, what's that? He said, to go back to your life, on an everyday basis, do good rather than bad things, in a moral excellence. Jihadism, however, is the use of or support of violence to achieve Islamism. That's the modern day definition of jihadism. We're going to be very, very careful, because if we say jihadi, we don't know what we're talking about. When Linda Sarsour, for example, last week or the week before said she's going to do a jihad against Trump. That's what she said. I don't know what she meant. I don't know whether she meant it this way, or I don't know whether she meant it in a spiritual way. I have no idea how she meant it. But the get-out clause for her was, I said it in a spiritual way. I said it in no way standing up against a tyrant. I didn't mean it as jihadism. Only she knows how she meant it. I don't know. No one can really answer. But jihadism is the support of violence, use of violence, and the support of use of violence to actually set up this Islamist state. The other thing I want to say here is you guys, and I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'll talk about this now. You guys have all heard of Sharia law as a statement. People saying Sharia law. I've read it in the paper. There's no such thing as Sharia law. Let me tell you what. If you get an electronic Quran and you get an electronic Hadith, all the collection, the Bukhari and Muslim from Muslim perspective, the Arabic word for law is qanun. Do a search for the word qanun in the Quran and in the Hadith. You will not find it. The word qanun does not exist. Law, the word law does not exist. When we say Sharia law, we use law as the noun and Sharia as the adjective describing the noun. That's what we say. We Sharia law, that's why we use it. The word Sharia is in the Quran, it's not an adjective, it's a noun. And the noun means path to oasis, path to water, how you can actually get replenishment, how you can actually get inner moral excellence and achieve peace. The word Islam does not just mean on its own peace, does not mean on its own submission. It doesn't mean that on its own. It would be incorrect to use either one of those two on its own. The word Islam comes from the root verb salam, peace. Islam. To submit to one deity and achieve inner peace. That's what the word Islam means. And Sharia is the path to oasis, which is a personal code. Sharia law, as they say, doesn't exist. What does exist is fiqh, jurisprudence. And Azhar University has recognised over 400, in inverted commas, legitimate interpretations of jurisprudence. There are many more. Every time somebody decides to come up with a law, it's man-made. It's a man's interpretation of what's said in the Quran or the Hadith. It's fiqh, it's jurisprudence. However, people will use aspects of Sharia or fiqh to impose that as state law, and that's what Islamists want to do. A couple of side points here. I was talking to Larry outside. Probably a lot of people have heard about the barbaric side of Sharia. And 1400 years ago, the Quran talks about slavery. The Quran didn't ban slavery 1400 years ago. We wouldn't accept it now. Well, we wouldn't. I wouldn't. Or other Muslims, a lot of Muslims, majority of Muslims wouldn't. The Quran is a collection of stories. The thing to realise is that the only people, when we hear about Sharia, who want to actually reintroduce the barbaric aspects of Sharia, which did exist 1400 years ago, are the people who claim they want a caliphate, but actually ignore what the last caliphate did. That was the Ottomans. What the Ottomans did in the Tanzimat reforms, if you want to read upon these, in the 1880s, they decriminalised homosexuality. The first state, if I'm not mistaken, ever to decriminalise homosexuality, ever. In all the lands they controlled. It was still a sin, but no longer was it a crime. Big difference between a sin and a crime. The second thing they did, they got rid of the hudud laws, which are the chopping off of the people. And again, it's in the Quran. Chop off the thief's hand. But they got rid of the law from a religious and political perspective, and they got rid of the law of the apostasy law and all that. No longer did the hudud laws apply. Now, people who want to bring the Islamists want to go sidestep them all the way back to what 1400 years ago and use a pre-modern type of interpretation of Sharia. The reason, and Charles and I have spoken on this many times, how did the Ottomans do it? Well, the Ottomans used to have a Khalif, or king. Khalif means different things, by the way, it doesn't always mean a Khalifa, as in Baghdadi. A sheikh doesn't always mean somebody who's a sheikh in religion. Somebody's got grey hair as a sheikh, for example. A Khalifa can be a king or a mayor, prince, lots of different meanings of it. Representative, lots of different meanings. But they had a Khalifa who was a king. And he would have a shura, council. And in that shura he would have the Sheikh al-Islam, who was the religious authority in the Ottoman Empire. And they would have a Grand Wazir, Prime Minister, and a whole bunch of people. And they used two key principles of how you get to jurisprudence that now, modern days, the Islamists and the Salaf Wahhabis want to get rid of. And they were, one is maslaha and the other one maqasid. Maqasid is what is the purpose and the spirit of the law. What was it designed to do? Any law, any interpretation of the law, what was it designed to do? And secondly, what is the benefit to society? Can something else be done better to achieve what it was designed to do? And they reason from a political, maslaha and maqasid perspective that they can get rid of these laws. And they were religiously got rid of. But modern day people who espouse, since the inception of Wahhabism, petrodollars, or Salafism as they like to call themselves, and emergence with the theology and Islamist politics, they want to go back to those particular laws 1400 years ago. And that is problematic. That is an issue. Problem for me, it's a problem for everybody. Let's move forward. It talks about Sharia law in the Quran and Hadith. Sharia is now not an adjective. Fiqh jurisprudence. The Islamist desires to enforce Sharia as state, a particular version of Sharia as state law, has never been done before the last century. And one of the first countries to do it was Saudi Arabia. Before that, it was never done. And other than a short time in Andalusia, very short period of time. I talked about the Islamist ideology. There is also the theology that is underpinning a lot of the actions that they're carrying out. We call it Salafi or Wahhabi from Saudi Arabia. Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, again by all means read on, if you haven't, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, his book called Kitab al-Tawhid, Tawhid. It's in English, you can get it. But even the Salafis, it's 1700 in Arabic, 1700s in Arabic, and translated into English last century. He's the grandfather of Wahhabism. He wrote it, Kitab al-Tawhid. And a lot of his stuff is used by ISIS and other people, even though he got it from somebody else, didn't tell me it, but that would be going back too far. So Salafis and Wahhabis, they have a problem with liberal secular democracies, but they have three categories. Without Salafi theology, you do not get Islamist terrorists. Because Salafi theology is the theology that says God will reward you for it, God will actually give you the 72 virgins, etc., 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 if you carry out terrorist attack. The Salafism and Wahhabism is very, very important to understand. And there are three main categories of Salafis. First of all, the Quietists. And the Quietists are a bit like the Amish community. They will dress differently. They will wear their trousers above their ankles. They will be misogynistic towards within their families, etc., etc. All the things that we don't like in our liberal secular democracies and our societies, but they don't try to impose it on anybody else. But they have a right to be how they want to be in their own societies, in our communities. Then you've got the revolutionary Salafis who want to change something, make a change, go out and convert other people, go and build capacity, etc. Then you've got the jihadis, when it merges with Islamist ideology. But I also wanted to remind everybody that there's also Shia Islamism as well. We know that currently at this moment in time, there are huge political challenges going on in the Middle East, and my own view is with the Saudi-Qatar thing, it's all about Iran. Saudi-Qatar, it's all about Iran. Qatar is one of the last GCC countries that actually has relationships with Iran, and the Saudis see Iran as a threat, as do many other, and they should do. They should do. The Iranians are a threat. But that's a sectarian threat rather than anything else. Okay. The far right. Far right, as we see, is all of Islam, and therefore all the people who practice Islam in some form or another, correctly, according to them, are jihadis. That's what, there are many scholars, I would call them, because they do have a PhD, they do have a doctorate, but are banned from entry into this country. I don't know whether you want me to mention their names. Yeah, well, okay. People like Robert Spencer, who are banned from coming into this country by the Home Secretary, believes that, and he said this to me, believes that you're not a proper Muslim, Haras, if you don't believe what ISIS want you to believe. And if you claim you believe something different, you're doing something that's called taqiyya. You're being deceptive. That's what he claims. The far right claim to be anti-Islam and not anti-Muslim. So when you challenge far right, say, no, problem with Islam, might have a problem with Islam. But when you then translate to being anti-Muslim, it is problematic. It's a very, very fine line. Very fine line. They will attract people. So I'll give you an example. So I was telling Charles and Larry earlier on. I live in Manchester. That's where I live during the weekends. And my same daughter, who's now 20, she wanted to go to the Adriana Grande concert, the terrorist attack that actually took place in Manchester at the arena. She had a ticket, and when she bought a ticket, she was available to go, but she's doing clinical psychology, and she's doing a placement, and she couldn't get out of it, so she had to sell her ticket. She could have been there. She could have been affected. Many people were. Many people were, especially for now, because before it was always a problem in London. Now it's a problem in other places in the country. And so people from outside of Manchester organised a march. And they called it a March Against Hate. And it was organised by former leader of the English Defence League, Tommy Robinson, and the march and the speeches were very, very anti-Islam, and all the things that I talk about, Muslims can't be Muslim unless they ban the Quran and do this and do that, all the rest of it. But guess what? There were about 3,500 people there, and I was getting phone calls from lots of people, normal, everyday people. This is why I talked about people who are left of centre, but on certain issues will vote with their feet or in the ballot box with things that we historically would consider to be far right. Rang me up and said, why don't you come to this? I'm going to be there. And I said, you're a Labour voter. You vote Labour. In fact, you're actually, quite left of centre, not quite far left, but you're quite left of centre. No, on this issue, I'm sick of the far left and Labour. This issue, I'm voting and going with these people who want to ban the Quran. This is a problem. It's happening here more and more, it's happening in Europe, it's probably, I know it's happening in the US as well, and other countries. They claim to be friendly to the Jewish diaspora. So this same guy, Tommy Robinson, he went to Israel and last year, and lots of photographs. By the way, he has a following on Twitter of about 350,000 people off the back of this work. And he had a meeting with some members of the Jewish community in Manchester, because he wanted to show that he's pro-Israel and that Muslims are against Israel, therefore I'm your friend. The good thing was that the Jewish Board of Deputies here and the CST recognised who he was and boycotted him and issued some very, very strong statements against him, that this is causing a problem. Because he is anti-Semitic at the core. He is, he's doing taqiyya. He is really far right on most of his politics. The anti-Muslim ideologues are gaining support. I talked about the taqiyya side of things. There was a journalist here called Katie Hopkins. Any of you guys have been following her? Katie Hopkins was a presenter on the LBC. So LBC is the largest national debate talk radio show in the country. And she was one of their leading presenters, and she's a journalist as well. And quite far right of centre, and she got sacked out of her job, sacked from her job about 2 months ago, for sending out a tweet calling for the final solution against Muslims. And she knew exactly what she was talking about. They would believe, and she's part of the counter jihad movement. We're seeing a lot of from the far right of it, a lot of the stuff that they have been using historically for anti-Semitism now being turned on Muslims, some Muslims. That's the far right. It is a political horseshoe. If you go far enough right or far enough left, they'll merge. And we see the same things and debates and ideas rotated by 180 degrees, because some people will say Islam is at war with the West, rotated by 180 degrees, the West is at war with Islam. Turn around saying the West is discriminating against Muslims, well, etc., 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 Muslim supremacy, white supremacy, etc. And then you've got the bigotry of low expectations. You've got inconsistency from the far left on lots of things. You've got inconsistency in the far right. And the people that are benefiting are the Islamists. Let me tell you about the inconsistencies. The far left, historically, have stood up against things like homophobia and racism. They have. And when a Catholic Church, for example, will issue statements which are homophobic, they'll condemn them. But when a Muslim does it, they would apply the same set of values. And it's almost like the savages don't know better, let's stick up for them. They will not condemn Muslims who are being homophobic. In fact, what they will do, there's an organisation called the Southern Poverty Law Centre, you guys may have heard about it, an organisation that I used to have a lot of respect for, designed to stick up for people of colour. They made the reputation by taking the KKK to court. Well, they've just named our chairman in October as an anti-Muslim extremist, and we're taking them to court. The only Muslims on there, and there are ideological reasons on why they're doing it. And I actually know the person, 2 people actually wrote the report. One I can tell you, who advised on the report, belongs to a leading Islamist organisation in the US, who've been very, very critical of. And the other person, I would say, who doesn't know what she's doing. And there's money flowing that way. But they were designed to stick up for people like me. That's what they were designed to do. But now they'll attack people like me. Our chairman, and call him an anti-Muslim extremist. When he's a Muslim himself, and what's he doing? He's attacking Islamists. The far right, the hypocrisy in the far right and the inconsistency. We had here in the UK a legal political party called the BNP. You guys probably heard of it? Nick Griffin was the head of the BNP. It's now bankrupt, so it doesn't. I think 2 or 3 years ago it was disbanded for financial problems, but it went for a number of years. He went to Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, and a number of other people when they were actually quite anti-Islam and asked him for money to fund the organisation. But guess what the fuel is for all 3 of them, the common thing they have. So we have the left eye covering itself up, which is the far left. We have the right eye bursting a blood vessel. The Islamists saying there's divine inspiration from above. But all three will blame all of their problems on the Jews. All 3 are anti-Semitic. In Germany, there was a march of the far right and the Muslim Brotherhood organisation, Islamist organisation, and where did they share the platform? The platform was being anti-Semitic. And we've got all these strange alliances and things going on. If we just focus, and by the way, I'm going to focus on the slides afterwards on Islamism now, in a minute. But if we just focus on Islamism, we're going to miss. We're in the situation where I was in 2004, when I went to the government and said, we've got a problem, we might have a 7-7 here. And they said, don't worry, we've got a different problem, we haven't got a problem here, and we had 7-7, and things got even worse. When tackling and looking at anti-Semitism, bear in mind the triple threat, and I would say that it's a triple threat not just to a liberal secular democracy, it's a triple threat to Muslims. Now I want you to reimagine I'm a Muslim. So Muslims and Jews and the rest of our society. Because these people want to kill me as well. There are 4 people in our organisation that have credible death threats right this moment in time. One person has a $12.5 million bounty on his head, and the others have other. I've got a credible death threat on my head right now as well. They want to kill me also. But guess what? If I was sat here, and Charles was sat here, it'd be a tough choice for them if the new child was Jew, who'd they kill first? I don't know. I actually don't know who'd they kill first. I know they want to kill me, but they also would want to kill Charles as well. Because why? Charles lives in Israel. Charles is Jewish. By the way, you guys must have heard that speech from Macron the other day. I thought it was a great speech. Fantastic speech. Probably, and Larry, again, you know what I'm saying, probably the only Western politician that can actually say that and gain the right level of attention. He's Europe's most influential politician right now. It's not Angela Merkel, it's Macron. The person who controls the power is the person who has the power is the person who controls the messaging, the charismatic recruiter, the leader, etc. He is the great hope for Europe. He defeated the right and the left, the establishment, and guess what? He also defeated a fascist in Marine Le Pen. So when he says it, and the way that he played Donald Trump, as well with other things, fantastic. But the real fuel, the common thing that all these 3 people don't, I envisage at some stage, someday, a march where you can have the far right and the far left and Islamists, and it's going to be an anti-Semitic march. It's not unreasonable to think about that and to maybe think that that might be feasible. It's possible. But right now, Islamism is a bigger problem. Of course it is. Shia and Wahhabist Islamism is a bigger problem. But bear in mind, that is coming, that is here already, and something in your work to look at it in a bit more detail. Okay. CV strategy. How do we do stuff? Okay, I'll talk for a little, we'll take a break at 3:30. I mean, is this useful? Because I've sort of thrown in other stuff as well, yeah? Okay. I want to talk about the worldwide strategy now on combating this problem. And when we actually wrote the prevent strategy and then the CBE strategy, we said if you can't explain it in one slide, you don't understand it. A bit like the elevator pitch or the bar stool test that we had in the commercial sector. And this is the one slide. The reams and reams of the US government strategy and the UK government strategy and the EU strategy, etc. And the strategy is thus: if you look at Muslim attitudes and views at any given time, you'll find that X% directly support ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and other Islamist terrorist organizations. And I said X% because it varies.
What's the proof?
I beg your pardon?
When? How?
This is done all the time. So, that's why we used X. But in 2003, it was 4.7% in Britain.
And what is it now?
This is not Chatham House, so I can't say. I will tell you off camera later on. Happy to do that. Because I'm securing certain things that I can't talk about. Happy to over a coffee and say the number. It's higher. It's high. It's a little bit higher. They're still there or thereabouts. The official number, I can tell you, is 5%. That's official. So, and that can be anywhere. The UK, in the USA, anywhere in the world, X% will, at that moment in time, support an Islamist terrorist organisation, either directly, through fighting, fundraising, recruiting, a whole bunch of other things, or just say, I support. Y% of Muslims have sympathy, will sympathise. And they will say, I do not support, oh, by the way, you never talk about ISIS. I went to a civil servant, a meeting with a politician actually, he was there, a minister of a country that should remain nameless. And this was about 1.5 years ago. And he said, Haras, do you think we can work with Al-Qaeda? I said, what? Do you think we can work with Al-Qaeda to actually defeat ISIS? As if ISIS was the only problem. 10 years ago, now we were talking about ISIS or ISIL. Have you guys heard this stupid thing about, let's call them Daesh? Have you guys heard this?
Yeah.
Yeah? You know what Daesh stands for?
For the state, right?
Daesh stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, which is ISIL. It's the same. And it was almost like, let's call them Daesh because they don't like it. We'll defeat them by calling them Daesh. It's ridiculous. We actually had a motion in Parliament where it was actually, there was a vote on this. Should we call them ISIS or ISIL or Daesh? And it was decided, let's call them Daesh. Dawlat al-Islamiyya that's it. It stands for ISIL. Islamic State of Iraq and Levant.
It's different. You Arabic audience, you are from European audience.
Yeah,
What do you prefer?
it doesn't matter. There's no way to defeat them by calling them Daesh.
So you have many options.
Absolutely. But there was an official parliament vote. Let's call them Daesh because they don't like it. And let's not call them ISIS or ISIL. Ridiculous. Anyway, so we talk about ISIS now. And 10 years ago we were talking about Al-Qaeda. We were talking about Taliban. But ISIS and Al-Qaeda did not inspire extremism. Extremism inspired them. So by just focusing on here, you won't defeat them. You might militarily force them out of Mosul, and they'll go into what Al-Qaeda is, a global jihadist insurgency, and what ISIS really is as well, apart from the land that they control. But let's not think that just focusing on ISIS at the current moment, because 5 years' time, there'll be another acronym, or there'll be another name, unless we actually get to grips with this. But wide percent of Muslims sympathise. And these are Muslims that say we don't directly support ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. By the way, let's not forget ISIS and Al-Qaeda are also fighting each other. That's the other thing. This is why this politician was saying, let's work with Al-Qaeda to defeat ISIS. Everything will be fine then. Okay. So, but a wide percent at any given time will sympathise, and sympathy is, I don't support them, but I actually want to achieve what they want to achieve. I might want to do it democratically, I might want to do it through a military coup, I might want to do it some other way, but I'm not going to directly support ISIS. Groups in there, mainstream Muslim Brotherhood, or even though they've declared a combative jihad in Egypt right now. You've seen the fatwa. A couple of years ago they declared a combative jihad in Egypt now. Ikhwan.
Yeah.
So they are now a jihadist. One can say that in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood is now a jihadist organisation again. Even though they started off as one, they're now one again. They had this period where they said, "Oh, we're not terrorists and jihadists anymore," but they are again in Egypt. But these people might be, major offshoots of Muslim Brotherhood. Hizb ut-Tahrir. They could be a whole, in the UK, US, you've got other groups, CARE, ICNA, all these kind of groups who want to be there and achieve what they want to achieve, but might want to do it differently. But still want to chop off somebody's hand once they get their own way. Still want to, if they're a thief, still want to kill somebody who's an apostate. Still want to stone to death somebody who commits adultery. However, in their version of the Islamic State, if somebody follows through their version of Sharia and due process. Empathy is, don't support them, don't sympathise with them, but kind of understand why they want to do it, why they would do it. 33% of European Muslims said, we don't support what happened at Charlie Hebdo, but we kind of understand why they did it. That 33%, we kind of understand why they would select Charlie Hebdo as a target, because Charlie Hebdo was blasphemous. That's it. The shortest time, and I'm going to use this because I can, the shortest time, so my boss at Europol, Gilles de Cacot, and Europol, by the way, is the European equivalent to the FBI. And he said in an open forum in Prague, I was there sitting next to him, doing my presentation, he was doing his. He said in an open forum that the shortest time he's observed where somebody was in the space where they were showing empathy to moving over here and becoming operational, about to become a terrorist, is 2 weeks. That's the shortest time. I can use that figure because he said it in a public platform. I've seen shorter in 3 cases. one in Canada, one in the UK, and one in the Netherlands. 3 cases that I've worked on, less than 2 weeks. There's a guy called Ziamani who was arrested and charged to 22 years in prison a year and a half ago because he wanted to go out and emulate the killing of Drummerly Rigby with a machete in his bag and a hammer. 3.5 months before he was arrested, he was a practicing Christian. The radicalization process can be very, very quick. Let me tell you the holes in the CVE program, the holes in the American strategy. This is a hole that the British government in the UK tried to do in 2008 to 2010, then changed it. The US, under the Obama government, believed that the people who are here are not violent. These people who are here speak the language of these people, therefore can bring them back. Stop them being violent. They speak their language. Let's build the big tent. Let's love everybody. Everybody will love us. The reason why that didn't work is that these people will never ever move them back to where they are, and the strategy becomes all about containment. This gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's when ISIS declared the Islamic State. You have anywhere between 850 and 2,000 people from Britain that went off to join them. And the USA, by the way, doesn't know how many people have gone to join ISIS. They don't know. The authorities don't know. Even the UK government doesn't know. That's why the official figure is 850 plus. That's what I have to say officially. If ever I'm asked, because I'm coming to some of the information. It's a big plus. But it's somewhere in between 850 and 2,000. And where I can get the 2,000 from, again, somebody in an open forum, a member of parliament who is on the committee, the defence committee, said there were 2,000. So that's why I can say it and not get in trouble. And the reason, they'll never move them back further than there. And guess what? That 2.5 weeks. So you've got a bunch of people, that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. 10 years ago, that was very, very small compared to now. You asked me the question about 5%? That's not the answer. The answer to the problem, the real problem rather, is how big is this compared to 10 years ago? And let me tell you what our agencies say in the UK. Our agencies in the UK say that 10 years ago, they wanted to monitor 5,000 people. They only have the capacity to monitor 3,000. They said that they want to monitor 25,000 people now, because this has grown. You can extrapolate from that statistics that this has grown by a factor of 5. But if they had utopian, unlimited funds, resources, etc., they'd probably want to monitor up to 100,000. Because in the UK, and that's here. Not just here, but all of this as well. Because of this 2 weeks. That's what our intelligence agencies have said publicly. That's the worry. 10 years ago, that number was 5,000, not 25,000. That's the problem. The problem is that these people have been used and funded by government and empowered. In the US, you've got CARE, MPAC. Those people sit here. That's where they are. Here we've got Muslim Council, but a whole bunch of other people. So this got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The next explosion that's going to hit the US is the wave over the last 10 years of the people that have just been sitting here saying, you told me there's a covenant of security here with the US. I can't do something here. Not Baghdadi. Baghdadi Mark II has just declared something somewhere else. I'm going over there. He wants me to do something here as well. I now give my oath of allegiance to him. I'll do it here. Watch out for that, from a terrorist perspective. And by the way, the authorities, the agencies in the US do know that. So that's the sharp end of the CVE strategy. When somebody is here, there has to be an intervention, and there is nobody in this room, unless I don't know of something that's not on the biographies, that is qualified in this room to do the interventions there. That is de-radicalisation. And the interventions either have to be arrest, unless somebody here is law enforcement, you can't arrest somebody. If somebody is here, it's against the law, and they are actually a threat to lives. They need to be arrested. If somebody is here, They've not broken the law. They shouldn't be arrested. They shouldn't be penalised, but they should be. And here in the UK, we have something called a Channel Programme, which is a voluntary de-radicalisation programme. The US doesn't have any. I've been banging on to the Obama government for many years. Refused to do it. Thought it would be Islamophobic. And by the way, how many people, hands up in this room, if people in this room are familiar with the term Islamophobia? Keep your hands up a minute. Keep your hands up if you use the term Islamophobia. 1, 2, 3. Okay. You do as well? 4.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 4. Okay. I reject the term Islamophobia. And let me tell you why I reject the term Islamophobia. And I did a presentation in the EU Parliament where I had the head of the Muslim Brotherhood Islamophobia monitoring department next to me, and eventually at the end, it wasn't captured in camera, he agreed with me in front of the, when we gave evidence. Islam is a set of values. It's not a race. Islam is a set of ideas. Islam is something that I, as a Muslim, with it being a set of ideas and values, choose to accept for myself. In a liberal secular democracy, no ideas, no set of values should be off limits to critique. However, no individual is beneath dignity. So we don't use, especially the government here doesn't use the word Islamophobia, we use anti-Muslim hatred. Because when we use anti-Muslim hatred, it becomes about the individual, it becomes the person. Secondly, Islamophobia is used to reject and stifle legitimate debate and sometimes criticism of Islamist and sometimes of pre-modern theological positions that are no longer valid in our liberal secular democracy. I say that the word Islamophobic in itself is xenophobic. Because it's stopping people like me and Sheikh Salah and others have this reform within our religious community. Because people who are non-Muslims, well-to-do people, are saying you're Islamophobic. What right, actually every right, but what credibility does a non-Muslim have to call a Muslim Islamophobic if all he's trying to do is to say, you know what, Islam has a problem with homophobia? It kind of does. Traditional classical Islam kind of does, up until the Ottomans. Islam has a problem, it's producing terrorists. Islam has a problem, it's producing anti-Semites. You're Islamophobic. That's been said by non-Muslims to me, and I have to sit them down and explain to them, I don't have the energy to do it anymore, other people do that. I reject it, the UK government, David Cameron accepted that, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood Islamophobia monitoring group in an EU Parliament where we were giving evidence ended up agreeing with me. You can bat that off as well. Why should you not, in a liberal secular democracy, if you want to, have a go at Christianity? Why should you not, if you want to, if you are Jewish but not practicing, you don't believe, you might be an atheist, Jewish and atheist, why can't you have a go at the Jewish religion if you wanted to? I mean, religion, not the people or the concepts of being Jewish. Similarly, why can't you have a go at the concept of Islam? Of course you can. But then when you take it to the individual, to anti-Muslim hatred, that's when it becomes problematic. So, happy with that? Let's move on. So the Channel Programme is a voluntary programme where we de-radicalise. Sometimes people after they've been arrested and gone to prison, and sometimes people in this space. And this space here is rehabilitation, where critical thinking is done at schools. You know, the typical age range of people that joined Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan was in between 25 and 35, and no women. The typical age range of people who have gone to join ISIS from the Western countries, I'm talking about the West now, Western countries, not the Middle East. Typical age range is in between 14 and 25, and approximately in between 10 to 18% of them women, depending on which country it is, let's take an average of about 12 to 13% as the average. Higher in the US than it is here, funny enough. In the US at one time it was running at about 17 or 18% of women that went to join ISIS, so people who went to join ISIS from the US were women. 14 to 25 is a key stage. Key number to remember. And by the way, 20% of people who went to join ISIS from France were converts. White converts to the faith. What was the racism there?
20%.
20%, just under 20, 19.7%. Rounded up to 20. 20% of people that went to join ISIS from France.
But what's the general pool? 20% of how many?
Official number or the unofficial number?
Whatever you can give.
The unofficial number I can't give you because nobody knows.
That's fine.
The
other one.
The official number is in between 1,800 to 2,500. Sorry?
Say more, I think they more.
That's the official number. You're probably right, it's more, but some people, I've heard 5,000 as well.
I got from one French diplomat in Washington, some numbers. They are a few thousand.
I can only say the numbers in a non-Chatham house
Yeah.
that I am allowed to say in being part of Europe. I have to give you the official numbers. Yeah. 20% is a lot. Converse, it's a lot. Some of them, the radicalisation took place in prisons, other places, a whole bunch of reasons. We'll go. So here, this is about school teachers, and we've developed a toolkit called Terra, which helps school teachers look at behaviour, psychological behaviours, various things, and then do something about it. The real concept of the CVE strategy, the real reason why we developed it in 2004-05 was to build resilient communities. Here, we're providing the penicillin, if you like, to the disease. Well, the disease, we all know diseases use scientific analogy. Diseases evolve. Superbugs come along. ISIS is a modern-day superbug. What we really know from our medicine and scientific analysis is that the only way to defeat a disease is to inoculate against it. And the whole concept was to build resilient communities, and we've just won a project in the US to do that with 300, the Masjid Muhammad group, 300 African American mosques. And we're that's the only Muslim project that has been funded by the US Department of Homeland Security right now. All other organisations that were funding Muslim organisations were Islamists or Islamist spin-offs, and they've stopped doing that. This is good news. And this is a proof of concept, and our role with that is to project manage, make sure that the money doesn't end up going to Islamists, and do this resilient community building. Because guess what? The people from, so within the African American Muslim communities, you've got a number of different strands, but you've got the Nation of Islam, then you had Warathin Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad's son, who moved away from his father's belief, went to Syria, Damascus and Sham, and studied under Sufi sheikhs, and got ijazah, permission, etc., came back, and they're Sufis without calling themselves Sufis. And I don't know of any person who's been radicalised to terrorism from that community. It's a great model. They're doing something right. However, before we start having to apply the penicillin, we're going to help them make sure that their community really is resilient. And that's the CVE strategy, and we call that the soft end of prevent. And I'll stop now.
So we have like 3 minutes till tea break.
Oh, we do.
You want to continue?
Oh, is the next slide? I'm still with this slide. I'm sort of digressing. My apologies if I'm... no. We need to get... That's it. We need to get...
Are there any quick points of clarification before we go for tea? And we'll continue the conversation at 4. Just end it here? Okay. So,
CVE, can you explain?
Countering violence extremism.
Countering
violence
violence
extremism.
extremism.
That's the US government's strategy of combating this radicalisation phenomenon. And guess, by the way, up until here in the UK, it counters. Something I forgot to say. Sorry. In the UK, it was all about, and this is why I believe that the triple threat is really a triple threat. Up until the beginning of last year, nearly all the cases that were referred to the Channel Programme, which is the new radicalisation programme, were Islamist. Last year, 30% of them were far right, and in Wales, 50% of them were far right, and this year we'll see about 10 to 20% far left as well. refer us to the official government de-radicalisation channel program. That number will grow. And the one thing, and I meet them all, is that they're all anti-Semitic. And they all believe, and I'll come on to that in a minute, that Jews are the bogeymen. And I'll come on to the parkours and explain that a little bit.
So thank you. Let's go for tea.